The wind was sharp like knives, cutting across Myra's face as she walked slowly through the endless snow. She held her baby close to her chest. Wrapped in a thin blanket, the baby was not crying anymore, and that scared her more than anything. His small face was pale, his tiny fingers cold. She looked up at the sky, dark, full of gray clouds. No stars, no moon, only the sound of the wind and her own breath. She had been walking for hours, or maybe days. Time didn't matter here. Only one thing mattered: keeping her baby alive. Her legs were tired, her back ached, and her hands were shaking. The oxygen pack on her belt was blinking red. Soon, there would be nothing left. She stopped for a moment and knelt in the snow. The baby moved slightly in her arms, and she felt a soft breath on her chest. "Just hold on," she whispered. "Just a little longer." She tried to smile, but her lips were dry and cracked. Her eyes were filled with tears, not from pain, but from fear. This planet was not made for humans. The cold was too strong, and the nights were too long. She opened her mouth and began to sing. It was an old lullaby, one her mother used to sing to her on Earth. A soft tune, simple words, like a warm blanket. For the soul, sleep now, little star, drifts through the sky so far. Her voice trembled. But she kept singing. The sound was the only warmth left in this frozen world. Suddenly, she stopped. There it was. A sound, not the wind, not her voice, but something else. Footsteps, slow, heavy, steady footsteps in the snow. She held her breath and listened. Yes, someone was walking toward her. She turned quickly, eyes wide, her heart beating fast, but there was no one in sight. Only snow, wind, and silence. Still, the sound came again, louder this time. Closer, she stood up, clutching her baby tightly. Her eyes searched the white fog in front of her. Then a shape appeared, tall, dark, and covered in something that shimmered in the storm. It was walking toward her, step by step, not rushing, not running, just walking. Myra backed away, but her legs were weak. "Stay back," she said, but her voice was too soft. The baby let out a small whimper. The figure stopped a few meters away. It did not speak. It did not move, just stood there, watching. Myra could feel her heartbeat in her ears. Was it a man? A robot? A soldier? Was it even human? She couldn't tell. Then, the figure slowly raised its arm. Not to attack, but to show her something. In its hand was a glowing cube, pulsing with soft blue light. The light spread across the snow like a blanket of warmth. Myra could feel the heat touching her skin. Her baby moved in her arms, his cheeks turning pink again. She looked at the figure, confused, scared, and tired. The figure dropped the cube into the snow and stepped back. With one gloved finger, it wrote something in the snow. 2 words, clear and simple: follow or freeze. Myra stared at the words, her mind spinning. This could be a trap, or maybe her only chance. She looked down at her baby, then up at the stranger. She had no choice. She stepped forward, toward the glowing light. The figure turned and began to walk. Myra followed, her steps slow, her body numb. But she kept moving, one step at a time. Behind them, the storm began to rise again. The snow fell harder. The wind screamed louder. But in front of her, the glowing light showed the way. She didn't know where she was going. She didn't know who or what was leading her. But for the first time in days, she had hope, even if it was small, even if it was dangerous. She whispered the lullaby again, not for the baby this time, but for herself, to keep walking, to keep breathing, to survive. And far behind them, in the storm, another pair of footsteps began to follow. The snow fell like ashes from a broken sky. Myra followed the tall figure through the white fog. She didn't speak, she didn't ask questions. She just walked, one step, then another. each one a choice between hope and fear. The figure never looked back. It walked with calm, slow steps, like it had done this many times before. Its armor looked old, but strong. Dark metal plates covered its arms and chest, glowing softly in the storm. Blue lights blinked along its shoulders, fading in and out like a heartbeat. Mira wanted to speak, to ask, "Who are you?" But her throat was dry. Her voice was weak instead. She held her baby tighter and kept going. The cube's light still warmed her skin, even as the cold air bit her face. Suddenly, the ground changed. Snow turned to metal. They were walking across something buried under the ice, a large circle. Like a landing platform or an old hatch, the stranger stopped. It reached out and pressed a hand to the ground. The metal responded with a low hum. Lines of light appeared beneath the snow, forming a pattern, a symbol Myra didn't understand. With a sharp hiss, the ground opened. A wide stairway appeared, leading down into darkness. Warm air rushed out from below. It smelled like old wires, dust, and something else, something ancient. The figure stepped aside and pointed. Mira looked down the stairway, then back at the stranger. Still no words, only silence. Only the sound of wind above and the slow breathing of her baby. She walked down, slowly. Each step echoed like thunder in the tunnel. The walls were smooth, made of black stone and strange glass. Faint lights turned on as she moved. One by one, the deeper she went, the warmer it became. At the bottom, she entered a wide chamber. It looked like a control room, but also a shelter. Screens blinked on the walls. Some showed maps, others showed stars she had never seen before. A metal bed was in the corner, next to a small heater and water tank. Everything was covered in dust. This place had been empty for a long time. She turned to the figure, now standing at the top of the stairs. "You brought me here?" she said quietly. The figure nodded once, still no words. But Mira saw something in its eyes. Pain, maybe, or duty. She placed the baby on the bed and wrapped him in warm cloths. His color was coming back. Slowly, for the first time, she let herself sit down. Her legs felt like stone, her eyes heavy. But something didn't let her rest. She looked again at the screens. One of them caught her attention. It showed her walking through the snow, holding her baby. Then, another screen showed something else. A large shadow moving through the show. A large shadow moving through the storm. It was not human. It had too many arms, and its eyes glowed red. Mira stood up quickly, her heart pounding. She looked at the stranger, pointing to the screen. "What is that?" she asked. The stranger walked toward her, pressed a button. Words appeared on the screen. Blinking in red, "Intruder detected Sector 9 Baruchita suddenly." Alarms echoed through the chamber. The lights flashed red, and the walls began to close around them. The shelter was locking down. Mira picked up her baby and backed away. "What's happening?" she shouted. The stranger finally spoke. His voice was low, almost mechanical. "They followed you," he said. "They're not far behind." The chamber shook as something massive hit the surface above. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the lights flickered. Mira looked at her baby, then at the stranger. "Who are you?" she asked again, louder this time. The stranger reached up and removed his helmet. His face was scarred, his eyes cold and tired. "My name doesn't matter," he said. "But if we don't stop them, nothing else will matter either." Behind them, a deep sound echoed through the stairway. Like breathing, but too loud, too heavy. Not human. Not alive. Something was coming. Mira stepped back, holding her child close. The stranger pulled a weapon from his back, glowing with the same blue light as the cube. He looked at her one last time and said, "Stay behind me." And then, the shadows reached the door. The metal doors slammed shut behind them. A hiss of steam filled the hallway as thick barriers sealed the entrance. Outside, the sound of claws scraping against steel echoed like thunder. Inside, only silence and the glow of strange blue lights. On the walls, Myra's heart was still racing. She clutched her baby tighter, who had now fallen asleep in her arms. The stranger walked ahead slowly, his footsteps making soft echoes in the long corridor. Myra followed, her eyes wide, her breath shallow. This place was not just a shelter, it was something much older. Something built for more than just hiding. As they walked deeper, Myra saw doors on each side, some open, others sealed tight. Inside one, she saw a room filled with sleeping pods. Each pod held a person, frozen, silent, unmoving, men, women, even children, all asleep. As if waiting for something, she paused at the door, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this place?" The stranger stopped, but didn't turn around. He placed his hand on a screen, and a door slid open ahead. They stepped into a wide, circular chamber. Lights blinked on one by one, revealing a massive control room. Glass walls showed the frozen outside world like a window into another planet. Screens lit up, showing strange data, maps, symbols from Earth mixed with alien language. One screen showed the sky above, something large moving through the storm clouds. Another screen zoomed in on the snow-covered ground. It showed black, creatures crawling like insects toward the surface hatch. Myra took a step forward. Eyes locked on the largest screen. A live camera feed played there. She saw herself walking in the snow from earlier. Holding her baby, she turned to the stranger, her voice shaking. "You were watching me." "Yes," he said simply. "We've been watching all of you." Myra's hands trembled. "All of us?" she asked. The stranger didn't answer right away. Instead, he pressed a button, and a wall shifted, revealing a gallery of photos. Faces stared back at her, some old, some young, some familiar. One face made her knees weak. A woman with kind eyes, dark hair, and a smile she hadn't seen since childhood. It was her grandmother, but younger? How is this possible? Myra whispered. "She was one of the first," the stranger said. "She came here during the first exodus." Myra turned slowly, her thoughts spinning. The first exodus. "That's just a myth, a bedtime story." "No," he said, walking toward a console. It was real, and it failed. He tapped the screen, and a star map appeared. One planet blinked red Earth. Another blinked blue, the one they were standing on. "Our ancestors tried to escape extinction," he said. "They built this sanctuary. Far from war, far from collapse. But something followed them," Myra said softly. She looked again at the footage of the shadowy creatures outside. The stranger nodded. They were not meant to survive, but something changed. Suddenly, the lights flickered. A siren echoed through the walls. Softer this time, but urgent, the screen turned red. And a single word flashed. "Breach detected, Myra." Backed away from the console, she looked at her sleeping baby, now warmer, but still fragile. "What do they want?" she asked. "They don't want," the stranger said. "They consume." Then, he opened a drawer under the screen and pulled out a small glowing disc. He handed it to Myra. "This has the last record of Earth's memory," he said. "It was placed in your son's DNA before he was born." Myra stared at the disc in shock. "My son? He is the key," the stranger said. "Not just to survival, but to remembering who we are." Above them, a low growl echoed through the walls. Something heavy was moving, searching, testing the metal. The chamber lights dimmed again. Then, a second siren blared. This one deeper, more urgent. A message appeared on the screen. Sector 7 opened. Therein, the stranger said. Reaching for his weapon, Myra turned toward the sleeping pods. "What about the others?" she asked. He looked at her, silent for a moment, then replied, "They're already lost." Myra held the disc close to her chest. She looked down at her child. He was still asleep. Still safe for now, But outside, the footsteps were growing. Louder again. The walls trembled again. Dust fell from the ceiling like old snow. Mira gripped the glowing disc tightly, her eyes flicking between the screens and her baby. The stranger moved with speed and purpose. Typing commands into the console, his armor hummed softly, reacting to the rising threat above Mira's mind. Raced, the words he had said were still fresh in her ears. Your son carries Earth's memory. She had no idea what that meant. But somehow, it made sense. Too many things felt broken. Too many things hidden. And now, the past was waking up. A loud hiss echoed behind the wall, and one of the doors slowly opened. Beyond it, a hallway stretched into darkness. Red lights blinked along the walls, one by one. The stranger pointed toward the hallway. We need to go, he said. They'll break through this level in minutes. Mira nodded. Holding her child close as they stepped into the dark corridor, the door slid shut behind them, locking with a heavy clang. Their footsteps echoed through the silence, but Myra felt something else moving here. Not creatures. Not enemies. Memories. As they walked, holograms flickered on the walls. Scenes from long ago. People smiling, working, talking. Children running through the halls, laughter echoing. It was like the base was remembering itself. Mira paused as a familiar face appeared in one of the holograms. Her grandmother again, standing in a white coat. Speaking to a group of scientists, her voice echoed through the hall, calm and clear. We are not saving ourselves, she said. We are planting a memory, in the hope it will bloom again someday. Mira touched the wall, her fingers trembling. Her grandmother turned and looked directly at her, or so it felt. Then the hologram faded. What is this place really? Mira whispered. The stranger answered without looking at her. A vault, he said. Not for gold, not for weapons, but for people. They stopped at the end of the hallway, where a large round door stood, covered in handprints. The stranger pressed his hand to the door, and it scanned him. The door opened with a deep groan, revealing another chamber, larger, older, colder. Inside, rows of metal chairs faced a massive screen. In the center of the room was a small glowing orb, floating. In the air, the stranger stepped forward and spoke a single word. Awaken, the orb blinked, then projected a figure, a woman made of light. She smiled softly, and her voice echoed gently. Welcome, survivors. Mira gasped. The figure looked exactly like her grandmother, but younger, more peaceful. I am only a recording, the figure said, as if reading Mira's thoughts. But if you are seeing this, then someone has returned. The lights around the chamber brightened, revealing walls lined with artifacts, earth soil in glass jars. Old books, DNA samples, frozen plants, everything that made Earth what it was. All preserved, all waiting. Your son is not alone. The voice continued. There are others. Like him, born with a code, born to restart. Myra's breath caught. There are more. She asked. The stranger nodded, scattered across dead worlds. He said, sleeping. Like seeds, suddenly the chamber lights flickered again. The orb began to fade. The stranger grabbed Mira's arm. They've breached level 3. He said, we need to reach the shuttle hangar now. Myra turned to take one last look at the room. The past was all around her, frozen, silent, yet alive. Ghosts of a broken world waiting for a second chance, and she, somehow, was part of that chance as they ran down the next corridor. Alarms screamed again. Behind them, metal melted as creatures clawed their way through walls. The past was haunting them, but the future was still possible if they could survive long enough to reach it. The hallway twisted like a maze. Myra's boots hit the floor with shaky steps as she followed the stranger deeper into the base. Behind them, the metal groaned and buckled. Not from fire, not from heat, but from the cold. It wasn't just the temperature, It was a deeper kind of cold. Something unnatural, something alive. They're here. The stranger said without turning. His voice was calm, but Myra felt tension in every step he took. She looked down at her baby, still sleeping, still warm. The glowing disk in her jacket pulsed gently, almost like it could sense the danger too. The cold was creeping in fast, not through vents or open doors. It was bleeding through the walls, turning them pale and cracked like dry bone. Ahead, the corridor opened into a giant vault room. Tall glass walls filled with glowing green tanks lined the chamber. Each tank held something, not people, not machines, but tiny capsules. Hundreds of them. Mira stepped closer, her eyes wide, inside. Each capsule was a baby, sleeping, floating, protected. Each one had a name, a date, a tag with Earth's flag. This is a nursery, she whispered. No, the stranger said, his voice low. This is a promise. Before Myra could speak, the room dimmed. A strange sound filled the air, like whispers underwater. She turned slowly. The air behind them was shifting, folding in on itself like fabric. Then she saw them, the cold ones. They didn't walk, they glided. Their bodies were shaped like tall humans, but wrong. They had no faces, just smooth, icy skin that reflected the dim lights. Their arms were too long, and they moved without sound. They left frost behind with every step. The floor beneath them cracked and shattered like glass. One of them raised its hand. Myra felt a chill in her chest. Sharp and sudden, her vision blurred, and then everything stopped. She was standing somewhere else, not in the base, not in the cold, but on Earth. Or what used to be Earth. The sky was black, the oceans dried. Buildings lay in ruins, fires burned without heat. She saw people, her people, running, screaming, disappearing, and in the sky above it all. The cold ones watched, not with anger, not with hate, just silence. A voice echoed in her mind, not in words, but in feeling. You brought this, you ran, and we followed. You forgot. We remember. Then it was gone. Myra fell to her knees, gasping for breath. Her baby cried. Snapping her back to the present, the stranger stood in front of her, a blue shield glowing in his hand. Energy pulsed as he drove the cold ones back. His weapon crackled with ancient light, something between science and magic. Get up, he shouted. We're almost there. Mira stood, still shaking. Us. She looked around the vault. The capsules were starting to freeze. Us. Frost was crawling up the glass. She reached into her jacket and held up the glowing disk. It flickered, then projected a wave of heat. The frost stopped, but only for a moment. One of the cold ones turned toward her. It moved faster than the others. Its arms stretched out like a shadow. Reaching for the child, Mira screamed and stepped back, but before the creature could touch her, the stranger leapt forward. His blade sliced through the air, not metal, but pure light. The cold one shattered into mist. The others paused, as if surprised. Then the chamber began to shake. The roof above cracked open. Snow poured in like a waterfall. A loud, ancient voice filled the air. A language no human had ever spoken. But Mira understood one thing. They weren't just chasing. They were hunting, and this base, this sanctuary, was now a battlefield. The stranger grabbed her arm. There's one shuttle left, he said, down below. We get to it, or we die here. Myra looked back at the frozen nursery, then down. At her baby, then forward. With every step, she felt the past burning behind her. And the cold reaching for her future. They ran again. Through falling snow and ancient shadows. Behind them, the cold ones followed. Silent as ever. But now Mira understood one thing clearly. These creatures were not mindless monsters. They were survivors too, and they were here to end the memory. Before it could begin again, Asterisk's darkness pulsed like a heartbeat. Myra ran. Her boots slipping on frozen metal. The stranger was ahead of her, guiding her down a narrow spiral tunnel. Behind them, the cold ones moved without sound. But she could feel them, the cold pressing closer with every breath. They reached the lower level. This place was older, untouched by light. No glowing screens, no warmth, only stone walls and thick air filled with silence. The stranger stopped and placed his hand against the wall. Blue light spread like veins across the surface. A hidden doorway opened, revealing a wide chamber filled with glass pillars and floating data cores. The air was warmer here, but heavier, like it remembered too much. Myra stepped inside, her eyes drawn to a platform in the center. It held no machines, no weapons. Just a single chair, wires and sensors hung above it like a crown of metal. "What is this place?" she asked, her voice small. The stranger looked at her for a long time. "This," he said, "is where your memory begins." She held the baby closer, unsure what he meant. He reached into a panel beside the chair and pulled out a crystal core, glowing faintly. "This is the key," he said, placing it in her hand. "It connects to him." Mira stared at the baby. His eyes were open now, watching her, calm and quiet. The core pulsed as she held it closer to him, and suddenly the chamber responded. Lights flickered on the walls. A map appeared in the air. Not a star chart, not Earth, but neurons, a mind. The baby's mind inside it. Memory fragments sparked to life. Earth before the collapse, cities alive with light. Forests breathing, children laughing, then fire, smoke, the cold ones. Mira stepped back, stunned. He remembers. He holds everything, the stranger said. The last memory of humanity encoded into his DNA. Stories. Voices, art, history, language, all of it. Compressed into him. But why a child? She asked, "Why not a machine?" The stranger stepped forward, his voice lower now. "Because machines forget," he said. "They store data, but not meaning. A child learns, grows, and carries feeling. Not just facts." Mira looked at her son with new eyes. Not just a baby, not just her reason to keep going, but the future. A walking archive of everything lost. Suddenly, alarms screamed again. The cold ones had found the door. Frost crawled down the tunnel walls like reaching hands. The stranger turned to her. "There's one last step," he said. "You must transfer the code." She looked at the chair. "What happens if I do?" "You'll remember," he said, "who you were, why you were sent here, and what you came to finish." Mira hesitated. She felt the disc in her jacket pulsing faster. Her fingers shook as she placed the baby on the soft cradle. Beside the chair, he didn't cry. He just stared at her, like he knew she sat in the chair. The metal crown lowered over her head. Light wrapped around her eyes, and then she was elsewhere. Not a dream, not a memory, but a truth. One long buried, one hidden to protect her. She saw herself in a uniform, standing before the Earth Council. "You will carry the code." They said, "You will not remember until the final hour." She saw the ship crash, the storm, the long walk through the snow, the cold ones watching. From afar, she had been chosen, not by chance, but by design. Her child wasn't born, he was built, grown from her DNA. Shaped to hold what no machine could carry. Love, memory, and meaning. She gasped, eyes wide as the chair released her. The light faded and the chamber quieted. She remembered now everything. The stranger looked at her and nodded once. "You were not just a mother," he said. "You were the last archivist." A loud crack shattered the moment the cold ones had broken through. Their shadow fell across the chamber. Mira picked up her baby and stood tall, no longer just a survivor, but a guardian of all that had come before. And somewhere deep inside her, a voice whispered, "You are not done yet." The chamber cracked. Ice spread like roots across the walls. The cold ones entered, not running, not rushing. They moved like they had already won. Mira stood in front of the cradle. Her baby blinked. Glowing faintly under the flicker of the memory core, she felt warmth where there should be fear. Not because the danger had passed, but because she knew who she was now. The stranger loaded his weapon, stepping forward, but Mira placed a hand on his arm. No more running. She said softly, "It's time." He looked at her, unsure. Then, slowly nodded. Behind them, a door hissed open. The final exit, the shuttle hangar. Their only way out. Mira stepped through it, holding her child. Inside the hangar stood the Ark. A sleek, silver vessel shaped like a rising bird, half covered in frost. Half lit by blue power cells still working after all these years. The cold ones followed. They entered the hangar without sound, filling the air with cold so heavy it cracked the floor. They stopped just meters away, waiting. Mira reached the control panel. It flickered, unresponsive. She tried again. Nothing. The ship needed a command. Not a password. Not a code, but something older. A memory. She felt it then, the disk in her jacket. It pulsed like a heartbeat. She took it out, pressed it to the console. Still, the ship did not respond. And then she understood. It wasn't the disk, it was the lullaby, the one her mother sang. The one she sang in the snow. The one buried deep inside the baby's DNA. Not just a song, but the trigger. A musical key to unlock the Ark. Mira held her baby close, kissed his forehead. Then began to sing. Sleep now, little star, drift through the sky so far. The ship stirred. Lights blinked awake. Engines hummed. Close your eyes, don't fear. The dark, you carry the world within your heart. The cold ones stepped forward. But a beam of light rose from the floor, a shield of sound and memory. They shrank back. Their cold retreated. The song burned like sunlight. The Ark lifted slowly. Dust and snow spiraled around it like smoke. The stranger turned to Mira one last time. "This is your story now," he said, then stayed behind. To hold the cold back, as the ship rose higher, Mira sang louder. Not just for the baby, not just for Earth, but for everyone who is lost, for the ones sleeping in frozen pods. For the voices forgotten in static, the cold ones vanished beneath the clouds. The base collapsed, the snow closed in. But the Ark escaped, rising through darkness. Into the stars. Inside, the baby slept, safe, warm, carrying not just data, but songs, faces, and stories. Mira sat beside him, eyes full of tears and light. She looked at the stars ahead, endless, unknown but not empty. Because somewhere out there, others would hear the lullaby, and they would remember.